So I'm still waking up, and we get in the car, and we get to the hospital, and I don't know if you've been in a hospital, but sometimes the hallways just feel cold. And we walk down the hallway, and we finally get into this room, and I walk inside, and it immediately took my breath away because my dad was laying on a hospital bed with tubes and wires, and he was laying there unconscious. And I just remember trying to piece together in my mind, what is happening? And the doctor came in, and they explained that the night before he had overdosed on pills. And me and my family we're standing there in the hospital room just trying to piece this puzzle together because at that time I thought my family was perfect. I thought my parents had a happy marriage. I thought that we had things together, and in a moment I realized that there was pain. And as time went on, for the next 5 to 8 years, my dad really struggled with depression, and he really struggled with anxiety. And he had trouble sleeping, so he would drink to sleep. But he had depression, so he would take pills, and in the mix always led him to this place of just feeling hopeless. I mean, I literally could not count on both my hands how many times I was in a hospital room because my dad tried to take his life. And I don't know if you've ever found yourself in that position, but that's a hard thing for a kid to deal with. It's a hard thing to see your parent in that situation. It's a hard thing to piece together. Why is this happening to me? I'll never forget, a few years after the first time, we thought it was the last time. Because when we showed up, it wasn't just that he was unconscious, but he was unresponsive. And the doctor said, we're trying everything we can do, but he drank a lot. We're trying everything we can do, but he took a lot of pills. We're trying. And I'll never forget, I was there with my siblings and my mom, and the doctor walked in the room and he said, look, here's the deal. We have to put him on life support. And here's what that means. When we take him off life support, one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to pull through or he's going to pass away. But if we leave him on life support, he's never really going to wake up again. So I'm there, a kid, huddled up with my siblings, deciding if we want to pull the plug, deciding if we want to take him off life support, deciding what we were going to do. A kid should never, ever, ever have to make that decision. And I just remember thinking, God, why? Like, I'm trying to follow you. Why? Like, I go to church, I read my Bible, I pray. God, I believe truly in my heart that you are good. Why? Why are you letting me go through this pain? We talked about morning, we talked about noon, but sometimes we find ourselves in the night. Sometimes we find ourselves in a dark place. And we can't help but ask God, why? Peter found himself in the dark as well. In fact, the same conversation we talked about yesterday when Jesus commanded him to abide. This same evening, Jesus told Peter and the other disciples that tonight you will all desert me. Jesus told him, tonight you're going to turn your back on me. Tonight you're going to betray me. And Peter declared, even if everyone else deserts you, I never will. Now, to be honest, I love the optimism of Peter here. He's like, even if they, God, I got your back. It kind of makes me think, when you sign terms and conditions and it says, do you agree you read all these? And you're like, scroll, yep. I kind of think that's what Peter was doing. He didn't know what he was signing up for. Peter says, Jesus, I will never desert you, but he didn't get the full picture. Jesus responds, I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night, in the night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. And Peter pushes back again and he says, no, Jesus, I promise I won't desert you. I promise I will follow you. I promise I will stay strong for you. Later that night, they arrested Jesus and they led him to the high priest's home, and Peter followed at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and they sat around it, and Peter joined them there. Here's what's so interesting about this scene. When do you start a campfire? At night. When it's dark. When it's cold. Peter's standing around a fire when Jesus got arrested in the middle of the night. And while he's standing there, 3 different people come up and they say, hey, do you know Jesus? And Peter says, me? No, I don't know him. Another person comes up and says, no, I saw you with him. Me? No, you have the wrong guy. A third person comes up while he's at the campfire in the middle of the night and they say, no, I know I saw you. And he says, it wasn't me. You have the wrong guy. And in that moment, the rooster crowed. Exactly how Jesus predicted. And I can only imagine at that moment, Peter's stomach dropped. Because for 3 years it had been good. For 3 years he found new purpose following Jesus. For 3 years he had a new perspective following Jesus. But in a moment, he was experiencing a pain that he had never felt. It says, at that moment, Jesus turned and looked at Peter. And suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through his mind, before the rooster crows tomorrow, you will deny me. And Peter left the courtyard weeping bitterly. Could you imagine that moment? Not only did Peter deny Jesus like he said he would, but it says the very moment the Lord looked at Peter. I mean, it's awkward when you make eye contact with a stranger. Imagine that moment. Imagine what was going through Peter's mind. Imagine what he was feeling. You know that moment when your parents say, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Imagine the moment, standing around the campfire. Imagine the pain. Peter wanted to abide, but he failed. He wanted to follow Jesus, but he messed up. He was trying to be the best he could, but yet he was broken. Peter faced pain. And you will too. That's probably not new information to you. But you're going to face pain. You're going to face hard times. You're going to go through a breakup. You're going to go through friend drama. You're going to get into a fight. You're going to get cut from your team. You're not going to get accepted to your dream college. Your parents might get divorced. Someone you love might pass away. You're going to go through pain. Some of you are going through pain right now. I've heard it said that you're either going into a storm, you're in a storm, or you're coming out of a storm. We're surrounded by pain. Maybe you've never stood in a hospital room with someone you love, but I know you've experienced pain. But how we respond to pain matters. What we do with our pain matters. There's a psychologist, his name's David Benner. He says this: any hope that you can know yourself without accepting the things about you that you wish were not true is an illusion. Now, here's what I want you to notice. Reality must be embraced before it can be changed. So here's what I know. When it comes to pain, let's just be really honest with each other for a second. When it comes to pain, it's really, really easy to numb it. When it comes to pain, it's really easy to pretend it doesn't exist. It's easier to pretend that your parents getting divorced doesn't bother you than it is to actually deal with it. It's easier to pretend that you not getting into your dream college, shake it off, I didn't care anyways. It's easy to pretend like you didn't care. It's much harder to actually deal with it. But reality must be embraced before it can be changed. We have to be real. We have to be honest. We have to be open. How often when people ask, how are you, you just say, I'm good. Are you though? Are you actually good? Or is your anxiety overwhelming you? Are you actually good, or is the pressure of school feel like 1,000 pounds on your shoulder? The great philosopher, Mr. Rogers, says this: anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. Here's what both these people are saying. You have to deal with your pain. You have to talk about your pain. You can't just ignore it. You can't just suppress it. You can't just pretend that it's not there. Because here's what I can promise you. If you do not deal with your pain now or your disappointments now, it will come out sideways later. We have to deal with our pain. Now, here's the good news. Following Jesus changes our pain. It doesn't necessarily mean we won't experience pain. Peter did, and you will too. But it changes your pain. So my dad ended up living after the life support. He pulled through. It was honestly a miracle. But to be totally transparent with you, he physically lived, but that was the day I lost my dad. He was never the same. So for years, it was just this awkward tension. For years, it was this difficult, I said goodbye, but you're still here, but it's not really you. For years, I was grieving what happened, but yet it wasn't over. And for years, it was just a really tricky situation. And I got to the point where I just said, hey, I need a break. I just need some space to heal. And then me and my wife got pregnant. And I've never heard the Spirit speak so clearly. He said, you need to forgive your dad before your son is born. And I said, God, you got the wrong number. No, I don't want to abide anymore. You need to forgive your dad before your son is born. Now, here's the good news. Babies take 9 months to be born, so I had time to procrastinate. I was like, God, I hear you. I'll do it later. So time goes on, and I'm just wrestling with things. I'm dealing with things. Having a kid brings emotions you didn't know you had. And I'm not making this up. I was reading a pile of books about being a good father, and every single book I read said something like this. Chapter 1, forgive your dad. Chapter 2, deal with your past. Chapter 3, go back to chapter 1. And every book I read, I was like, okay, God, I get it. But I didn't want to do it. So eventually I reached the point, and maybe you've experienced this, I knew if I didn't do it, I was just blatantly disobeying God. And I hadn't talked to my dad in a couple years. I hadn't seen him in a couple years. So I did what any respectful man would do. I wrote him an email. I mean, literally, I said, "Dear Dad," I said, "here's some things that I think you did well. And I just want to forgive you for every other way you fell short." I said, "I'm really trying to work through some things and become emotionally healthy." And I said the phrase, "I just need you to know I forgive you." You know, they say forgiving someone is like setting a prisoner free. But once you forgive them, you realize you were the prisoner the whole time. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, the moment I forgave my dad, even though it was over email, the moment I said the words, the weight was off my shoulders. So a few months later, my son was born. And I sent my dad another email. I sent him a picture and I said, "Hey, this is Wendell J. Brown. He's the cutest kid in the world. He's weighing in at 9 pounds," whatever it was. And he responded, "Congratulations, I'm so happy for you." So my son was born on November 11th. On November 13th, I got a call that my dad passed away. It wasn't suicide, it was natural causes. But in a moment, I've never experienced the sovereignty of God. I thought it was forgive my dad before my son was born. That's what I thought. But God is so good. He saw my pain. He knew my pain. He was with me in my pain. When my dad passed away, I can honestly say I had no regrets. There was nothing left unsaid. I don't have to wish that I forgave him for the rest of my life. I don't wish that I would have set him free. Because of 3 simple words: I forgive you. Did it still hurt? Yes. Is it still painful? Yes. But I can promise you the pain that I feel is nothing compared to what it would be if I hadn't obeyed the Spirit and forgiven my dad. Because Jesus changes your pain. It's not that he takes it away, it's that he changes it. And he's in it with you. And he's for you. When we say God is sovereign, it means he's in control. And he sees the bigger picture. And he has your best interest in mind. You will face pain. But Jesus changes your pain if you follow him. So let's just be practical for a moment. Maybe you're in pain right now. Maybe you're facing a storm right now. If you're not, maybe you're about to go into one. Let's look at what Peter did. He faced pain, but how he responded is worth taking note of. How he followed Jesus in his pain is worth paying attention to. Luke 24, it says they rushed back from the tomb to tell the 11 disciples and everyone else what had happened. So this is post-resurrection. The tomb is empty. It's Easter Sunday. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and several other women who told the apostles what happened, but the story sounded like nonsense, so they didn't believe it. However, Peter jumped up and he ran to the tomb to look. Stooping, he peered in and saw the empty linens, wrappings, and he went home, wondering what had happened. Here's the first thing we learn from Peter, and please don't miss this. If you're in the darkness, if you're in the night, run towards Jesus. In Peter's darkest moment, when he betrayed his teacher, his Savior, his Messiah, he went running to the empty tomb. He went running towards Jesus. You know, there's one time in Scripture that Jesus describes his own heart. One time. You know what he says? He says he's gentle and humble in heart. That's the only time that Jesus explains who he is at the core of his being, gentle and humble at heart. Here's what that means. That means Jesus' most natural position is open arms. Meaning this, a lot of times we think about God as this awesome, power, amazing force in the heavens, which he is. But he's also the most approachable human that ever walked this earth. Here's why I tell you that. When you're in the darkness, when you're in the middle of a storm, I can promise you from Scripture, from my own experience, that Jesus has open arms and he's saying, "Come to me." It doesn't matter if it was your fault or if it was someone else's fault. Come to me. It doesn't matter if it's big or if it's small. Come to me. He's gentle and he's humble and he has open arms and he's saying, bring your burdens to me. When we're in the darkness, we run towards Jesus. The story continues in John 21. We're skipping. Simon Peter says, I'm going fishing. That's what he did, right? His friends, they say, we'll come too. So they went out in the boat. They caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach. The disciples couldn't see who he was, so he called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? Do you remember this story? They replied, no. He says, throw out your nets on the right side of the boat and you'll get some. So they did, and they couldn't haul in the nets because there were so many fish. You might remember that story from yesterday. It was one of those miracles that Jesus did with fish. Here's what I want you to notice here. This story happened post-resurrection. This story happened after Peter betrayed Jesus. This story happened in Peter's darkest moments. Do you notice who Peter was with? He was with the other disciples. Because when you're in a dark season, you need to surround yourself with other believers. Please don't miss that. Run towards Jesus and surround yourself with other people who are following him. Do you know how easy it would have been for Peter to let his shame get the best of him and just to go and hide? You know how easy it would have been for Peter to say, I'm going to go fish alone? Do you know how easy it would have been to say, I don't belong with you disciples because I denied him 3 times? Do you know how easy it would have been for Peter to isolate himself because his shame was overwhelming? You've probably been there. When that sin keeps coming back, or that habit that you're trying to stop keeps coming back, and you're too embarrassed to tell anybody, so you just retreat. When you're so heartbroken that no one's going to understand it, so I just need to be alone. When you're going through a difficult time and you know you should be here, but yet you stop coming. When your friends try and reach out, but you leave them on red because it's just too much to handle. I know you've been there because I've been there. It's easier to just, I'm going to handle it myself. You can't handle it yourself. You need to run towards Jesus and surround yourself with people who love you and care for you. You need friends that are in your corner. And I'm not just talking about friends that are going to woo you no matter what. My sister went through a breakup a few years ago, and her friends were like, man, he sucked anyways. And I'm like, okay. And they were like, we never liked him anyway. Like the day before they loved him, but after the breakup, they were like, he was no good. You don't need those friends. You need people that are actually going to speak truth. You need people that are actually going to stand strong and say, no, we're going to follow Jesus together. And I'm going to be with you through the whole thing. You need people that are going to go fishing with you. You run towards Jesus and you surround yourself with other believers. The story goes on. The disciple that Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, "It's the Lord." I love this next phrase. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic and he jumped into the water and he headed to shore. Last time he ran to Jesus, this time he couldn't help but swim. I'm going to Jesus. The others stayed with the boat, they're the logical ones, and they pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards away. Now, I love this. The other crew is like, hey, we got a lot of fish. We should probably take them to shore. Like, we're 100 yards away. It's not that far. Peter said, nope. I can't help but run to him. I can't help but swim. I don't know how boats work, but I don't think I could swim faster than a boat, to be honest. But Peter didn't care. I've got to get to Jesus because I can't carry this weight anymore. I need to give it to him. When you're in a dark season, you prioritize Jesus, and he will provide. The other disciples, I'm not blaming them, but they were concerned about the fish. They were concerned about the practical things. Peter said, I don't care. There's going to be times in your life when trusting Jesus isn't going to seem like the practical thing to do. He will provide. There's going to be times in your life when it seems so dark that trusting in Jesus and taking a leap of faith doesn't seem like it's going to work. But when the Holy Spirit whispers to you, he will provide. When you're in a dark season, put him number one, and I promise you everything else will fall into place. He will provide. In verse 9, it says, when they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them. Jesus was a chef. Who knew? Fish was cooking, so fish for breakfast, blah, over a charcoal fire. And there was some bread. Now, can I give you a nerd fact for a second? They say that smell is one of the strongest cues for our brain to remember things. So when you smell something, you remember the last time you smelled that thing. That's why when you go to your grandma's house, you remember, oh, I love her, whatever. So Peter pulls up, and there's a charcoal fire burning. When's the last time we read about a charcoal fire? When Peter was standing around a bonfire, and he denied Jesus 3 times. I'll say it again. Imagine the moment. Peter gets there first. He sees Jesus. Remember, the last time he saw Jesus, he wept because he was filled with shame. He sees Jesus and he smells the fire. We can only assume that he was taken back to that very moment when he betrayed him. We can only assume that he was taken back to that embarrassing moment. We can only assume that he was reminded of his mistakes. Yet Jesus was there with open arms, waiting for him. You see, before, I think, when Peter saw Jesus, he thought, he's mad at me. This time, I think Jesus was making it clear, no. I love you, and I'm here for you, and I'm not going to give up on you. So they're at this bonfire, and this time, instead of denying Jesus 3 times, Jesus asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" Peter says, "Of course I love you." Jesus says, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Of course I love you." Jesus says, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "You know that I love you." And Jesus says 2 words that carry so much weight. Follow me. Remember 2 of the first words that Jesus said to Peter? Follow me. In the morning, follow me. In the middle of your day, follow me. In the nights, follow me. In the good seasons, in the bad seasons, follow me. When you're in a dark season, you have to decide to follow Jesus every day. Now, I'm not talking every day you need to wake up and play your wind chimes to accept him for the first time. But when you're in a dark season, every day when you wake up, you need to make a decision that you're going to follow him. When you're in a dark season and there's pain and there's shame and there's insecurity and there's fear, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow you. You know, I used to think that to follow Jesus meant that you never messed up. I used to think that following Jesus meant I would have my life put together. I used to think that following Jesus meant that life would be good, and good Christians don't make mistakes, and real followers of Jesus don't ever fall. Here's what I've come to learn. Becoming a mature follower of Jesus has nothing to do with falling. It has everything to do with getting back up. So here's my question for you. When you're in a storm, are you going to give up? Are you going to throw in the towel? Or are you going to get back up? and follow Jesus. Are you going to get stuck in the storm? Or are you going to swim towards Him? Let's do this. Just close your eyes for a moment. I don't know what you're going through right now or what you're coming out of, or I don't know what you might be going into, but I just want you to imagine your storm right now. Imagine the pain that you're going through right now. I want you to imagine that pain is literally like waves that are crashing against you. And some of them are so strong that they're knocking you over and you can barely even stand. I don't know what that pain is for you. Maybe for you, it's the depression that just keeps coming back. And maybe you've tried different medicine or you've tried different things, but yet you just can't seem to escape the darkness. And it feels like waves that are crashing against you over and over and over. Maybe for you it's the anxiety of going back to school, and maybe it's the workload, maybe it's the friends, maybe it's just the pressure to be a good student, to get good grades, to get into that school. And maybe that pressure just feels like waves that keep knocking you down. Maybe it's every night this week at camp you went home to a family that's broken. And you love coming here because you feel safe, but there you don't. And the things that they say to you, the things that they do to you, day after day, just feel like waves that are knocking you over. Maybe it's friend drama, someone that you thought you were close to, someone you thought you could trust until they went behind your back. Maybe it's an addiction. It's a sin habit that you know you need to quit. And you can hear the Holy Spirit whispering. You can feel Him convicting you, but yet you just can't seem to stop. And every single day, it feels like waves that are knocking you over. You can keep your eyes closed for a moment, but here's what I love about Jesus. In this story, Peter swam to Him. And maybe that's you. Maybe tonight you need to get back up and swim to Him. But if you're in a storm and you're getting knocked down by the waves and you're going, I can't even get up. How am I supposed to swim to Him? Jesus can walk on water too. And if you feel like you're drowning right now, if you feel like you can't even get up, if you feel like you can't even catch your breath, oh, you have a God in heaven that is chasing after you. You might feel like you're drowning right now. And this might be the very moment that he's walking on water to save you. Because he's good. And he doesn't want to leave you in your pain. He wants to change your pain. He wants to be with you in your pain.